class, this is the next lecture to watch for Tuesday, March 31st, but make sure just to watch by Thursday, April 2nd, since we'll be doing problems related to this lecture. So, yay, we're finally done with Chapter 6 on environmental risk. This will be a little less depressing of a chapter. It's on water quantity and quality. So we need a general understanding of where water comes from, or the different places that water resides, before we get into chapters 8 and 9 about water and wastewater treatment and stormwater management. So there'll be 4 hydrologic systems considered in this chapter: rivers, lakes, and reservoirs. So remember, reservoirs are man-made lakes or behind dams usually, and wetlands and groundwater. So in this first video, we'll go over section 7.1 just to keep things short and not have very long videos. So introduction to water resources and water quality. Here are some of the objectives. So hopefully you're familiar with the hydrologic cycle. We've kind of covered that in chapter 5 in biology. Be able to distinguish between point and non-point sources of pollutants, and be able to explain the major components of the Clean Water Act. So first, hopefully everyone knows the definition from your glossary or from before about hydrology, and many of you have to take hydraulics or a hydrology course, or might be taking one right now. So hydrology is the fundamental science that deals with the occurrence, movement, and distribution of water on the planet. So if you see the hydrologic cycle in the corner, and here is a larger picture of that, figure 7.1 in your textbook. So given we know what hydrology is, what do you think water resources engineering is? So water resources engineering is the management of hydrologic cycle to transport water for supply, wastewater collection, flood prevention, and transportation networks. A lot of times when we think of water resource engineering or water resource engineers, we think of dams. So if you see the cover of a textbook, so there's a whole textbook and courses devoted to water resources engineering, but it also has to deal with transportation networks for boats or systems like down the Mississippi River canals. So getting to some other definitions. Hopefully from your glossary, remember you can distinguish between point and non-point source pollution. So try to look which ones do you think are point and non-point sources, or even just based on using point or non-point. I'll give you a little bit to think about it. Okay, so point sources are usually from like a factory, industry, or wastewater treatment plant, like it's a discharge from usually a singular pipe or outsource into a river, stream, other water source, the ocean. And non-point sources are more distributed, so they can be a lot of times from agricultural sources or runoff from developments in cities, even rural homes and suburbs. So this is a point, like a definition that comes up often and can kind of be confusing if you're not familiar with it, so please review this. So one of the next objectives was understanding the Clean Water Act. There's some links there for further reading if you'd like. So this is a very, very important legislation in the United States. Came out similarly with the Clean Air Act. Rivers were catching fire from all the pollution that was discharged to them. So this was significant legislation that was formerly the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, but had significant amendments. It established the basic structure for regulating pollutant discharges into the waters of the United States, and it gave EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the authority to implement pollution control programs, such as setting wastewater standards for industry, maintained existing requirements to set water quality standards for all contaminants in surface water. So they did, TMDLs was another one of your glossary lists or acronyms. It's a good one to be familiar with, our total maximum daily loads. And so that's just, the amount of loading allowed to the allowed to water bodies such as nitrogen and phosphorus. And so it made it unlawful for any person to discharge any pollutant from a point source into navigable waters unless a permit was obtained under its provisions. So you'll see in here NPDES permits or NPDES permits. That's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And so these are permits that are, your industries, even agriculture, are required to adhere to for how much they're allowed to discharge into water bodies. So it funded the construction of sewage treatment plants under construction grants program. So before, a lot of our wastewater was barely being treated or not treated at all and being just charged into water bodies, into oceans and streams and rivers. And recognize the need for planning to address the critical problems posed by non-point source pollution. So not just regulating industries and treatment plants, but also agriculture and discharge from cities and suburbs.